and the studio is always reachable at 330-450-7625. You can text or call that number. And I do have some tickets for the Black Keys today. We'll get those passed out in the 8 a.m. hour. That show in October. Rocket Mortgage Fieldhouse on that one. I'll get you hooked up around 8:45. This very morning on that Black.
Warning. The show you're about to hear has been prepared by some of the best talent in the industry we can get. For the money. Do not attempt this at home. Doing so would only expose just how useless and brainless these people really are.
Because if we didn't get him a job, he'd probably be dead. It's The Stansberry Show, Rock 106.9.
Welcome to Thursday morning on The Stansberry Show. We're on Rock 106.9. You can find the podcast of any show you may have missed online for you at WRQK.com. Now, me personally, you can find me on your socials. The Stansberry Show, and the studio is always reachable at 330-450-7625. You can text or call that number. And I do have some tickets for the Black Keys today. We'll get those passed out in the 8 a.m. hour. That show in October. Rocket Mortgage Fieldhouse on that one. I'll get you hooked up around 8:45. This very morning on that Black Keys show is also at 9 a.m. One of my favorite athletes of all time, Tiger Woods, looking to make a push at the Masters. And apparently he's taking it very seriously. He has not won a major since, I believe, 2019 when he won that Masters, and that was an awesome moment in sports. Him walking up 18 with everybody behind, it was just amazing. But apparently Tiger would like to win this Masters, and he's taking it very seriously. So much so that the training regimen, he has added something to it, and I'm not sure it's his best move. Apparently this is all about focus, which Tiger has been well documented. When it comes to him on the golf course, homie can focus. But this is all about focus, and I think he's actually stepping away from one of the things that made him as confident as he once was on that golf course. So we'll get to that coming up at 9 o'clock, because apparently he's going to stay away from it until he tees off at the Masters. Also, the kids may be all right. I read an article yesterday talking about how this younger generation, a lot of them, is saying, you know what, man, I'm tired of looking up and down the street at all my friends who have, degrees, who are all bitching about how they can't buy houses. My buddy who hangs drywall, my buddy the house painter, my buddy the drywall guy, the cement guy, the bricklayer, all them guys, dude, they all own homes. Every guy in the union's got a house. What the hell am I going to college for? They're starting to go back to the trades. Which I believe kind of points out that life is just kind of cyclical like that. And human beings will go where the necessity is, because that's where the money is. And so when we were all convinced that the only way to make any money was to go to college, everybody went to college, got a communications degree, came out of it and was like, well, I can't use this for literally anything. And so, they didn't do anything. And so everybody rushed to go get the 4-year college degree thing. Well, now we did that for a generation and a half, and not enough people are in the trades. So people are making boatloads of money in it. And so people are now starting to see opportunity in that. Mike Rowe had been talking about this and said this was going to happen like 10, 15 years ago with his shows, Dirty Jobs, and some of the other shows he had been doing. He was right about it. And he was also right about the fact that we have kind of done this thing in this society where we look down on people if they didn't go to college. It's one of these interesting things, because normally we use money as the benchmark, right? You would not believe how many people in trades are making, I mean serious bank. Now, not all of them do, but plenty of them can. I know a plumber in Vegas who's going to do $230 this year. Or no, I'm sorry, that's what he filed his taxes at for last year. $230,000, man, as a plumber. Now, is every plumber in Las Vegas making that kind of money? No. Can they make a lot of money? Yes. Do you know how to fix anything if something should go wrong with that system in your house? Not enough people do. Which makes knowing how to do it that much more valuable. You got a nation full of people going to YouTube to figure out how to replace a light bulb. You don't think the trades were going to end up paying a ton of money? So we'll get there coming up at 8 o'clock. The kids may just be all right. We'll get there, like I said, at 8. Also, an elephant attacked a safari truck. And I don't have a lot of sympathy for this. We'll get there at 7 o'clock. I don't have a lot of sympathy for this. I've said about bear hunting or whatever. Dude, you want to go out there, you want to go look at the thing, You go into their environment. Fine, go do it. Go do whatever you want. But if something should happen to you out there, I am kind of the guy that's like, well, I mean, you kind of went out there, right? There's no elephant on my street. You know what I mean? That's not a thing. I can avoid the elephant anywhere I want. If you want to go do the safari thing, great. But it's a wild world out there. And they're not going to play by the human rule. And so when an elephant knocks over a safari truck, I'm sorry, man. Like there's only so much like sympathy I can have. You literally went out there to be in their environment. That's going to happen. It's like a shark bite. It's like, well, what were you doing? You know what I mean? My neighbor doesn't have a shark. That's not a thing. That's not a thing. I can avoid sharks. It's easy. All I got to do is not go into their environment, and I'll be fine. So we'll get to that coming up at 7 o'clock. Also, people are now starting to turn their opinion on AI. 3/4 of people in a survey recently said they believe AI can make better entertainment than humans are making. I don't think right now. I think in 10 years, and I'll bet, you know what? I'll say 3 years. 10. I don't know what the hell I'm talking about when you're talking tech. I'll say 3 years. You may not be able to tell the difference. You may not be able to tell. They've proven this with song lyrics. They've proven this. There are programs that you just pump in hits into it. It can break down what about it is that people like, and it just tells you to recreate that. I think it's going to get a little bit more monotonous and like a little bit more like, all right, I can tell this was written by that, in the near future. But in the end, could it make better entertainment than some humans? Maybe. This is one of those times where I knew I was going to be right, and I am. When AI technology, when all of that stuff, when I said it for years, when it's taken $45,000, $50,000 factory jobs away from people in Indiana, everybody says, what do you expect? And I told you, once it starts taking $300,000 writing jobs away, wait till you see everybody's tune on AI change. And sure enough, it has. All those people writing those articles are all now writing articles about how AI is going to be the one to end up writing the articles. They're right about it. But that's why you shouldn't have maybe turned your outlet into the, really, your wife should be pegging you, or you might be right-wing if you won't let her, right? Like, they went a little too far down that rabbit hole. They got a little too preachy on, like, some of the things and some of the wild content that nobody was really looking for. So we'll see what happens with that. But 3/4 of you do believe that AI can make better entertainment than humans are currently making it. And with as poorly as this show has started out this morning, they may be right about it.
Don't blame the station. We expected you to cancel him by now.
Well, my horoscope said that I shouldn't assume responsibility for anybody but myself.
The Stansberry Show on Rock 106.9.
330-450-7625 to send a text to the studio. You can use the microphone talkback button on iHeartRadio as well. There is so much made all the time about the beefing between the generations. Boomers and Zennials and the like. They always seem to be at each other's throats. It always seems like Gen X is always kind of in the middle, just kind of looking around like, dude, what's everybody yelling about, right? Like, just kind of seems like that's where we normally fall in at. But you hear about the separation between these two groups of people a lot. And I've said before, and I think I can be right about this, that, back in the day, a 19-year-old didn't talk to a 70-year-old. Maybe your Grams, but, like, not even that much, right? Now it's like 70-year-olds and 19-year-olds debate the hot topics of the day all day via socials, right? And I think a lot of good can come out of that and some bad, too. But I was encouraged when I saw this, which I have here some advice that young people say, as much as I want to eye roll the older generation, I was given some advice by members of it, and this has been beneficial in my life. And I've thought some of these were interesting. One of them says here, my grandfather told me, what you learn when you are young, you never forget. This guy says, I have quoted that so many times to my own children. He has young kids now. What you learn when you are young, you never forget. Well, that's interesting. I probably didn't learn as many things. They're talking activities here and like trying things, and I probably wasn't as active as I should have been as a kid. I wasn't like the first kid to try to skateboard or things like that. I did it, but I wasn't like the first kid to kind of try to take to things like that. And I've got buddies who were all into that when I was a kid, and they are still very much into it. Like, that's still part of their hobby, where they, you know, on the weekend they'll go skate or do whatever. And to me, it's like, dude, you fall down now, man, you're hurt for like 4 or 5 days, right? Like, I don't know how you're doing that, but I think that's probably good advice. Let's say it doesn't bear out as 100% true. It's still going to get the children to try and do more things, and I think the more things you try, probably the happier you'll end up being. Another piece of advice here, a young person says, oh, an older person gave me this and I liked it. When I came of dating age, an older person gave me the greatest first date advice ever. Never order spaghetti or fried chicken because there's no way to eat it and look cool. Yeah, looking cool is important on a first date. I think it can be overvalued, but let's be honest, people are judgmental. Spaghetti, if you eat it properly, I don't think you'll look uncool doing it. And by properly, my grandmother was, my dad's mom was like right off the boat, Italian. And if you did not use a spoon to swirl spaghetti, she would like literally pull out the wooden spoon out of the sauce and wrap you in the knuckles with it. You know, you didn't cut bread there, you ripped it. You broke it there at her house. Like, that's just the way it was. So like, if you use a spoon, I think it could be all right. If you're slurping noodles into your mouth like you're 7 years old, yeah, it's going to be hard to look cool doing that. Now, the first date advice, now the fried chicken, I would maybe be on board with this. I used to have this system when I was out there dating. I'm not any longer. And, but when I was out there and you would go out on dates, I would not eat anything with my hands the first maybe 2 days. I'd get something with a knife and fork, or like, you know, a little bit more decorum here, right? Let's get to know one another a little bit first before we start getting like wing sauce all up and down the cheeks and the like. So I'd be more likely to not eat a piece of fried chicken or something like that on a first date. I don't think it's the worst thing in the world you could do. But yes, I think it's, you know, looking good on a first date is not a bad idea. Another guy here says, you know, when I was learning to drive, my grandfather always stressed the importance of making sure other drivers commit to what they're doing and never assume. This one is good advice. He said, just because somebody has their turn signal on, that does not mean anything. Don't react until you actually see the wheels of the car turning itself. And I would agree with this. I mean, how many times have you been behind somebody who has a blinker on, turn signal, I guess is what I should call it. That's the way my dad taught me how to drive was, I want you to think of 1 out of every 3 people coming down the road at you is drunk. And his whole thing was, I'm trying to teach you to drive more defensively than maybe somebody else is. And if you think everybody else is drunk, you'll be paying attention to everything else that's going on around you. I actually thought that was pretty decent advice. I don't know how much I actually stick with that these days, as I am prone to the road rage and the yelling and the like. But I think that is good advice. Again, Susan says here, the life advice that I got was, my dad once told me that the best decision you can make with the information you have at the time. You can't make decisions on information you don't have. And she says, I've used that advice more than I can count. My dad's been gone for a couple of years. I ended up missing him so much for that. Yeah, I would imagine. Absolutely. And that is true, right? You make the best decision you can with the information you have at the time. You can't make decisions on information you don't have. And that's true. You know, I wish I was given an example there of what not doing that would look like. But we weren't. But that feels like that could hold up and absolutely be true. Jennifer says here, when I was a child, my grandfather told me to never talk about how much money you have or don't have. He taught me what oversharing is and that sometimes it's okay to keep certain topics off the table. Yeah, this has kind of gone down the drain these days. I remember when I moved to Oregon, my brother and I bought a bar, and somebody said to me, what'd you pay for the bar? And I just looked at him, I was like, a little rude, ain't it? And I said, dude, in the Midwest, we don't really do that. Like, we don't really talk about money like that. Like, it's uncouth to ask somebody a question. Now, that was a long time ago, because I don't think that would hold up today. But you are giving away a lot of information about yourself, especially if you're talking about how little money you have. The less amount of money you have, the more, this is going to sound like a dirty word, but the more desperate you become, and the more likely you are to be able to or need to do something for a little bit of money. And it's not always great that people know that. Because if you're trying to negotiate, you want to negotiate from a place of strength and not weakness. Now, the flip side of that coin is talking about how much money you have is, well, that should be. It's kind of, we kind of lost, and I said this once before, and I hope people don't misunderstand me, but this was one of the things I enjoyed during COVID, if I'm honest. Is like all the celebrities, all the athletes, everybody shut up about how much money they had, and they were in it with you, and we're sorry, and we're gonna do this, and like everybody was humble for a minute. And then the moment we all found out everybody was going to be okay, it's back to standing in front of the Ferraris. I better get the bag. Get me out of Buffalo if you're not going to pay me. Do this. I mean, everything. I mean, it's all right back to that. And we are, as money obsessed as I am, and I've said it for 20 years, I'm money obsessed because I understand that the country's money obsessed. And I don't want to be the only one. You know what I mean? Like, that's where that always kind of comes from. We are money obsessed, and we've become, like, there's so many influencers out there now, 18-year-old kids thinking that they're failures because they don't drive Ferraris right now. The world's a little upside down with it. And social media got a little braggy about it, and I get it. There's money to be made there. And like people were selling snake oil back in the day, you know, when we were, when we were riding horseback. So like, of course, now with new technology, the snake oil salesmen are going to show back up again, for sure. Absolutely. But I do think we would all be better off if we could get back to that a little. Let's not talk about how much money we have, and maybe a little less talking about how we don't have enough of it too.
By now, you're asking yourself, is he trying to be wrong?
You incinerating that I'm dumb?
The Stansberry Show.
8:45 this morning, I'll get you into the Black Keys. That show at Rocket Mortgage Fieldhouse in October. We had been talking about the younger generation finally starting to admit, you know what, sometimes the older people, they get it right and they've given us some good advice. Now, I've said, sometimes when you're young, and I felt this way when my brother's 7 years older than me, and that's a lot when I'm 10 and he's 17, right? And so I remember feeling like, oh, you don't know, and like, you quit talking down to me, and like, you feel like when you're young, sometimes that advice is you being lectured to, and sometimes the older people are lecturing you. That is true too. But sometimes I feel like they're just trying to save you some time, and you feel as if you're being lectured to. And it's like, nah, man, I'm trying to help you out. So we were kind of talking about this a little because, I ran across this list here of people talking about some advice that they were given. One of them was, this person was being taught to drive by their grandfather. And he said, look, just because somebody has a turn signal on, don't depend on that to let you know what it is that car's intention is, because you don't know that, right? There was some more about, saving some money and making sure that, if you can't afford it, don't buy it and things like that, which of course feels very oppressive to people now. But that is true, right? Penny saved, penny earned. And really it would be, I think these days, 5 pennies invested is a penny earned. But okay. Another one of these pieces of advice here is don't invite trouble. When I was growing up, I honestly thought my mom was talking about police, but that advice applies to everything. I'm a heavy overthinker, and I will get easily stressed and anxious, so whenever I find myself drifting to that place in my brain, I always remember not to invite the trouble. If it hasn't happened, don't worry about it. It really helps me keep a level head, and it helps me stay optimistic. That's interesting. I think that's probably, I would have, if somebody said to me, don't invite trouble, I would have thought that meant keep myself out of problematic scenarios where trouble could arise. And I think that's good advice. Right? I would have never put it into the filter of don't allow the trouble of your mind to take over. I would have never maybe said it that way. I would have maybe had that thought. I wouldn't have said it that way. Another one of these is my dad always told us to treat all people the same because everybody puts their pants on the same way, one leg at a time. Yeah, I think a lot of people are bad at this. The Bruce Almighty movie kind of, tried to teach us this lesson as, God was the janitor and Bruce is walking right by him and that whole thing. Working in the radio business kind of taught me this lesson the hard way once or twice. In this industry, you could literally go from the person who's hanging banners as an intern to the PD in a year. I've seen people with PhDs at 40 years old working for a 21-year-old high school dropout program director. This business is crazy. Like, it's because it all comes down to whether or not you can or cannot do the job. Not much else matters in this. It's results based, and everybody can see it. Can you do it or can you not? Is what it, so it, like all walks of life. That is. And so I've seen a million people who would have easily been dismissed who are now in serious positions. Take my boss as a great example. Keith Kennedy started working at KDD, I think he was like 19. 19. That guy is now a senior vice president of programming for multiple regions. And like for years, people would have dismissed that guy. And now all of a sudden it's like, thank God you didn't, right? Like, homie's a good friend to have. I know for sure he is. I know for sure he's a good friend to have. Another person says, my grandmother used to tell me, take the money and run. When it came to any kind of unforeseen windfall, whenever I feel iffy about something that worked out unusually well, a day at work, getting something for a sale price after the sale ended, her quote allows me to accept it, be grateful, and move on. A lot of people will feel guilty about, getting like a half a day off, or, a lot of people feel so guilty about taking time off of work. A lot of us don't take our sick days. There is an article prep that I have earmarked. I don't know if we'll get to that today. That might be tomorrow. But yes, I think that can be true. Take what's given to you. This was taught to me on the golf course in a similar fashion. A buddy of mine once said, dude, you need lucky rolls in the game. Whatever the game gives you, take it. Whatever advantage the game will give you, take it. If you're allowed to tee it up, do it. Whatever the advantage is, take it and run, because the game's hard enough without it. And I would think life is very similar in that fashion. Somebody else is telling me here, my dad always said to give everybody 6 months to show you who they really are. Usually at that point, the mask will come off. This has helped me with friendships, dating, and work colleagues as well. Yeah, I could understand that, and I think there's a little truth in that. I've heard it said a year, but 6 months is who somebody really is. If you're spending a lot of time with somebody in 6 months, you should be able to figure it out. Now, what makes that such a tough statement, what did I just say there, is I'm kind of helping one of my friends go through a breakup. Her boyfriend broke up with her out of the blue, like she did not see it coming at all. And it's one of those things, when you start talking about it with somebody, you realize how many red flags you looked over. And then after the relationship breaks up, you're like, oh my God, that was so easy. How the hell did I not see that in the moment, right? It's kind of one of those things. So just because you've given them 6 months to show you who they are, let's not pretend that you have seen who they are. Those rose-colored glasses, man, can have you overlooking a lot of stuff. This came in off the text line at 330-450-7625, and I've never heard this, but Matt says his grandfather used to say, a 5 out of 10 decision made decisively and seen through to the end is better than an 8 out of 10 decision that took an unusual amount of time to arrive to. Make a decision and stick it out. Don't fool around and go back and forth. That's interesting. I've never heard that one. On first listen, it sounds crazy, because I was like, well, if I can make an 8 out of 10 decision versus a 5 out of 10 decision, I'd rather make the 8 out of 10. But indecisiveness can cost you in life. That's for sure true. Not being able to make a decision in the moment, what to do, hem-hawing on it, can absolutely cost you in the long run. It's a lot like preventative maintenance on a car. Like, people will think, oh my God, $60 to get the oil changed? It's like, or a couple $1,000 for the engine, right? People say, oh my God, you're going to pay $70 to Uber home, or $10,000 for the DUI, right? And so, like, it's it's a very similar system there. Yeah, I would kind of agree with that one here. Bo says, man, I don't know if this is air friendly, but when I was a kid, I was told by somebody in my family that sex is like basketball. You always dribble before you shoot. Yeah, I got to be honest with you. That's good advice. Simon says here, the advice I was given was don't dwell on the past. It cannot be changed. My mom and dad and I were fishing, and my mom accidentally dropped a stringer full of fish over the side of the boat, and I remember being mad about it. My father just started laughing and said, never let it make him mad. He taught me a valuable lesson that day. The past, don't cry over spilled milk is essentially what that is there. And I think there's some truth in that. I don't know if it's 100%, that you could apply it to every situation. Much like I always, people will say, this is really good advice. What other people think about you is not your concern. And I have, for 10 years, I've been pushing back on that. I don't think we can say what people think about you doesn't matter and say in the same time that life isn't what you know, it's who you know. And I know what people are really trying to say, that don't let what everyone thinks about you overtake your mind. But there should absolutely be a list of, I'm going to pull a number out of the thin air, but like 20 people that you absolutely do need to care what they think. First and foremost, your children. What your children think of you absolutely matters because it will depict what they do, right? Absolutely. What your partner thinks about you is a big deal. I hate to say this, but what your coworkers think about you matters a great deal. What your supervisor thinks about you matters a great deal. Your future when it comes to your career is mostly decided when you're not in the room. Think about that, because it's true. And so whether or not people feel like you're a team player, or you have a decent attitude, or if you're willing to try harder, or all of that stuff matters. All of it matters. I don't know if I would let the opinion of a stranger overtake your mind. That part makes sense. But just the blanket statement of, I don't care what, and again, this is the statement, I don't care what anyone thinks about me. Well, this is interesting, right? Because we already went through one of these pieces of advice where somebody said, my dad taught me to treat everybody the same because everybody puts their pants on the same way. Right. And what did we say there? We talked a little Bruce Almighty. You never know who somebody is. And then I kind of walked you through the radio business. You could be 19 and drop out of high school and be in charge of somebody with a PhD. Right. So since you don't know who somebody may be or who they may be in the future, what they think about you may absolutely come around and either help or hurt you. It does matter.
He was the most hated man in America. And then Kanye came along. Thanks a lot, Kanye.
9 a.m. this morning, what Tiger Woods is doing to try to win this Masters. I think he's crazy. I don't think it's going to work. I don't think this is the way to go. I really don't. Now, that guy can play golf, and I suck at it, so he may have the answer and I don't, maybe, but we'll get there at 9. I don't know if I love this idea for Tiger. I don't know if I love that. We have been talking about advice, and people really don't like my take on what other people think about me. And it just goes to show, like, advice is a lot like memes, right? That if you just say it and there's no counterpoint, it's like, oh, God, sounds really smart, right? And it doesn't mean it's not smart, but, like, when you don't have a contextualized argument on the other side of it, you can pass anything off as like, oh, that's the virtuous and smart opinion now, right? And I really don't understand what other people's opinion of me is none of my business. I don't get that at all. I don't get it at all. I don't understand it. I don't allow everybody's opinion of me to matter on the same level. I triage that. But when you're talking strangers, you have no idea who they are or who they could be. My job has kind of taught me that, right? Because they'll tell you, like, there's a certain type of listener that listens to, like, Rock 106.9 type morning shows, guys like me. But it isn't true at all. As a matter of fact, my better half found that out yesterday while she was at work. Somebody went in there and was like, hey, is she here today? They were having a meeting with another company, and this guy was like, is she here today? I'd like to meet her. And when she met him, he goes, I gotta tell you, I listen to him every day. I feel like I kind of know you now. And she was like, you listen? She would have never thought. And it's like, it's literally everybody. See, but look there. I maybe see that guy in the grocery store and don't think he listens either. Right? It's don't know who strangers are. So what people think about you doesn't it hate yourself. That I hate yourself. That I understand the mentality of. But this just, like, sometimes when people say, I don't care what anybody thinks, it's the same thing. And people feel as if too many people, and maybe ourselves included, allowed some negativity to weigh us down. And that there's a message in, don't allow that to happen. But fully not caring what anybody thinks is a wild mistake. just try to pay attention when you hear that statement come out. And think about it. Would you trade situations with the person who's saying it? I'm going to bet most times your answer is going to be no. This is what I have seen, and this is anecdotal. This does not mean this is the only way this happens. This is what I have most often seen with this mentality. It is either A, somebody who's never going to attempt to do anything really, and they are using it as an excuse as, well, I don't care what anybody thinks about me, to be who they want to be. Or it's the celebrity who has already made it to the top of the mountain. They have the money, they have the house, they have the celebrity, they have everything. And so now it doesn't matter what anybody thinks about them because they already have the cash. Early on in the documentary, it's nobody thought I could do it. They all told me I couldn't do it. And so then I used that as motivation. I dug down deep and then proved everybody wrong. You know what that is, don't you? Giving a damn about what people thought about them. That's what it is. Proving people wrong is part of life. Doubters is what I'll call it, not necessarily a hater, but you will have doubters in life, for sure you will. And proving them wrong, using that for a little motivation, is you caring about what they think. Otherwise, why do you need the motivation? Why do you want the revenge? Because it matters what other people think. This is, you know what this reminds me of? Money doesn't matter. All you need is love. Which I have said, I believe that comes from the evil corporations that everybody bitches about. They use their entertainment divisions to put that in songs and shows and movies and to keep us at the point to where we are more likely to nickel and dime ourselves into the poorhouse. Money of course matters. You know it does. If money didn't matter, why are we talking about $25 an hour minimum wage in this country? Because it matters. You can't just say things out in the air and be like, all right, now this is true. Like, that's not, well, I guess today you kind of can, right? I guess what I just said is not all that accurate because you can kind of do that. I understand what people are trying to say. It's just sometimes that phrase can kind of annoy me because it's like, well, is this why you didn't get the promotion? Do people hate you, or do you just feel as if you have to make no alterations to what your personality is because you don't care what people think? Like, what you say to your brain over and over again will become what your actions are.
Back to the Stansberry Show on Rock 106.9.
8:45, I'll get you into the Black Keys. It's 330-450-7625. That's the number you'll need then. You can also text that number all throughout the program. It was a couple of years ago in here I said, man, nobody cares about technology taking jobs away from factory workers. But you just wait, man. These studio execs and all these people, they're going to figure this out, man. And some of this technology is going to start taking $300,000 writer jobs away. And when it does, you're going to start to hear everybody complain about what a problem this is. Man, look how wrong I was. I mean, that one was easy to see coming. It doesn't matter. Learn to code. 60-year-old factory worker who's never going to go back to work ever again if we fire you? Who cares? But now all of a sudden, when you can't write your article about how my wife should peg me or I'm not progressive enough, now all of a sudden it's the biggest problem in the world. And I bring it up because AI is infiltrating Hollywood. And it's only going to get worse. Many in Hollywood are expressing fears now that artificial intelligence technology will create massive disruption in the industry. It will. And it's going to lead to potential loss of jobs. It will. A new survey results tell us, though, that 70% of U.S. by a human than by AI. You know what they never ask people in these kind of studies? Okay, so you said that. I'd rather do that. The follow-up question that's not in most...